Good evening and welcome to Beyond Shakespeare, to this reading of the magnificent entertainment given to King James and Queen Anne, his wife, and Henry Frederick the Prince upon the day of His Majesty's triumphant passage from the Tower through his honourable city and chamber of London, being the 15th of March, 1603. As we come up to, well, in our time, we're coming up to the coronation of our own King, Charles III. It seemed fitting that we look at some early modern examples of material regarding coronations. I'm your host, Greg. Rob, who is usually in this seat, is currently somewhere on the Emerald Isle being wonderful and directing, so he's left it to our own devices and desires. We have a small but select team of people who have joined us tonight. We have Eric, and we have Desna, and we have Tracey. Tracey is well known in the early modern community for her work on civic pageantry Lord Mayor shows, for which see our YouTube channel, which is full of the things. And we've read many things over the last couple of years. I think that's as much as I can say. If anybody wants to introduce themselves, please do. Right. So we have one extra person who will be joining us, the lovely Liza, but she is currently just on her way, hopefully. The text is by Thomas Dekker, a playwright of that period, probably well known for working on Middleton with The Roaring Girl, and also his comedy, The Shoemaker's Holiday. Hey! And I've prolonged that introduction long enough that Liza appears in the room. Eric, can I get you to read the bit that I left out of that intro part?
Is this the
as well as by the English?
Yeah, as well as by the English as by the strangers, with the speeches and songs delivered in the several pageants. I'm guessing this is Martial Temple Deus or something. Morris Populus dedit Otia Pharaoh, Astra Suis. I'm guessing that's cello, but I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Sidera Certa Louis, or Lovey, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Givis, I suppose.
Oh yeah, that should be an I. Sorry,
Jovi.
Joey, yes, my bad.
Jupiter.
I cannot read. Thomas Dekker, imprinted at London by T.C. for Thomas Mann the Younger, 1604.
Desna, can you read that first section, the device down to the end of that longer paragraph?
A device projected down but till now not published that should have served at His Majesty's first access to the city. The sorrow and amazement that like an earthquake began to shake the distempered body of this island by reason of our late sovereign's departure, being wisely and miraculously prevented, and the feared wounds of a civil sword, as Alexander's fury was with music, being stopped from bursting forth by the sound of trumpets that proclaimed King James. All men's eyes were presently turned to the north, standing even stone still in their circles, like the points of so many geometrical needles, through a fixed and adamantine desire to behold this 45 years' wonder now brought forth by time. Their tongues neglecting all language else, save that which spake zealous praise and unceasable wishes for his most speedy and longed-for arrival. Insomuch that the night was thought unworthy to be crowned with sleep, and the day not fit to be looked upon by the sun, which brought not from some fresh tidings of His Majesty's more near and nearer approach. At the length expectation, who was ever waking, and that so long was great, grew near the time of her delivery, rumour coming all in a sweat to play the midwife, whose first comfortable words were, that this treasure of a kingdom, a man-ruler, hid so many years from us, was now brought to light and at hand.
Liza, can I get you to read the next section, the Latin and the paragraph after?
Martial. Et populi vox ad una venit. and he that was to be conducted through some utter part of this his city to his royal castle the Tower, that in the age of man till this very minute had not been acquainted nor borne the name of a king's court. Which entrance of his in this manner being famed abroad, because his loving subjects the citizens would give a taste of their duty and affection, the device following was suddenly made up as the first service to a more royal and serious ensuing entertainment, and this, as it was then purpose, should have been performed about the bars beyond Bishopsgate.
Okay, so my understanding was it started at the Tower and ended up at Westminster, but Tracey, can you sort of put us in geography and or what exactly is going on here?
Yeah, this is a kind of a bit of a dogleg bit. This was intended to be performed when James first arrived in London from the north at Bishopsgate, which is obviously, you know, the end of the Great North Road. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. So it's just been appended to this text. It's not part of the actual formal entry. As I think he says, a more royal and serious ensuing entertainment is the main body of the text. This is just a kind of, you know, for completeness kind of thing, really. They'd be surprised some people don't understand, don't realise that. The other thing that's probably worth noting is the date. It says the 15th of March 1603, but of course that's 1604 in modern parlance, if you like. James came to the throne in 1603, but everybody was too busy dying of plague to have a big thing, really.
I always love the flowery language in these things and seeing what and descriptions. Tracey, can I get you to read the device and the paragraph out, that sort of first section?
Yep. The device. St. George, St. Andrew, the patrons of both kingdoms, having a long time looked upon each other with countenances rather of mere strangers than of such near neighbours, upon the present aspect of his Majesty's approach towards London, were in his sight to issue from two several places on horseback, and in complete armour, their breasts in comparison suited with the arms of England and Scotland, as they are now quartered, to testify their leagued combination and new sworn brotherhood. These two armed knights, encountering one another on the way, were to ride hand in hand till they met his Majesty. But the strangeness of this new begotten amity flying over the earth, it calls up the genius of the city, who, not so much mazed as wondering at the novelty, intercepts their passage.
And most aptly in our judgment made this domesticum human the genius of this place. They just claimed the preeminence of first bestowing salutations and welcomes on his Majesty, genius being held into fictos theos to be god of hospitality and pleasure, and but such a one was meet to receive so excellent and princely a guest. What if not worthy for these two former respects, yet being deus generationis, and having a power as well over countries, herbs, and trees as over men, and city having now put on a regeneration, and as on new birth, the induction of such person might, without a warrant from the court of Christi, dear, past very current. Can somebody please try and sort out what the heck I was supposed to be saying? Because those words made no sense.
The first one looks to me like regeneration or new birth, it says. So a bit like Doctor Who, really.
Yeah, it's all right. It just totally threw me, that one.
And then the court of critists is basically critics, right? I think. I'm spitballing here. Anyone with any more accurate information should say.
I think it's possible. There's a certain sort of defensiveness here and there in this text, actually, particularly with the London Joinavant is no longer a city song later on. So yeah, there might be a bit of, like, you know, warding off criticism kind of thing. You get in prefaces and preambles to plays quite a lot, don't you? So it's the same sort of vibe, I think, going on there.
Yeah, Tracey, apologies if you've already said this and I missed it. Do we know why it seemed like from the wording that this entertainment did not in fact take place?
This bit didn't, no. No, this was intended to be when James first arrived in London from Scotland.
Yes. Oh, I think the dubious word at the start of the next paragraph is the word false. It must have been L then long S.
Cool. Eric, can I get you to make a false flourish? Desna, can I get you to read The Multitude is Now to be our audience? And then Lindsay, can I get you to be Genius Loci? And stop there and work out the next stop.
To make a false flourish here with the borrowed weapons of all the old masters of the noble science of poesy, and to keep a tyrannical coil in anatomizing genius from head to foot, only to show how nimbly we can carve up the whole mess of the poets, were to play the executioner, and to lay out Suti's household god on the rack, to make him confess how many pair of Latin sheets we have shaken and cut into shreds to make him a garment. Such feats of activity are stale and common among scholars, before whom it is protested we come not now in a pageant to play a master's prize, for nunc ego ventose plebis suffragia venum.
The multitude is now to be our audience, whose heads would miserably run a wool gathering if we do but offer to break them with hard words. But suppose, by the way, contrary to the opinion of all the doctors, that our genius, in regard the place is feminine and the person itself drawn figura humana, sed ambiguo sexo, should at this time be thrust into woman's apparel. It is no schism, be it so. Our genius is then a female, antique, and reverend both in years and habit. A chaplet of mingled flowers interwoven with branches of the plane tree, crowning her temples, her hair long and white, her vesture a loose robe changeable and powdered with stars. And being on horseback likewise thus furnished, this was the tune of her voice.
Sorry, I think I can't remember what I said. I thought it was Liza. I said Genius Loci, but
Okay. Genius Loci. Stay, we conjure you by that potent name, of which each letter is now a triple charm. Stay and deliver us of whence you are, and why you bear alone the ostent of war, when all hands else rear olive boughs and palm, and halcyonean days assure all's calm. When every tongue speaks music, when each pen dulled and dyed black in gall is white again and dipped in nectar, which by Delphic fire being heated melts into an Orphean choir. When Troy's proud buildings show like fairy bowers, and streets like gardens are perfumed with flowers, and windows glazed only with wondering eyes, in a king's look such admiration lies, and when soft-handed peace so sweetly thrives, that bees in soldiers' helmets build their hives, when joy a tiptoe stands on fortune's wheel in silken robes, how dare you shine in steel?
oh, I love a good speech. Oh dear. Any thoughts, anybody? Sorry, guys. Any thoughts?
Well, we've had the pageantry of the knights, and then we've had the spirit of the place bidding them stay and creating a little piece of theater in presumably the middle of the street. But shall we read on and finish the scene?
Yes, I think that's a good plan. So, sorry, Tracey, can you do St. George in the next Genius speech? I'm assuming that's the same Genius Loci.
I'll try. St. George, lady, what are you that so question us? Genius, I am the place's genius, whence now springs a vine, whose youngest branch shall produce kings. This little world of men, this precious stone that sets out Europe, this, the glass alone, where the neat sun each morn himself attires, and gilds it with his recussive fires. This jewel of the land, England's right eye, altar of love, and sphere of majesty. Green Neptune's minion, about whose virgin waist Isis is like a crystal girdle cast. Of this are we the genius. Here have I slept by the favour of a deity, 44 summers and as many springs, not frighted with the threats of foreign kings, but held up in that gowned state I have, by twice 12 fathers politic and grave, with the sheathed sword and silken law do keep within weak walls millions in awe. I charge you therefore say, for what you come, what are you?
Yeah. Both of the above knights at arms, St. Andrew, for Scotland's honour aye, St. George for England's eye. Both of the, possibly again, both sworn into a league of unity. Oh, dear. Eric, can I get you to do I clap my hands for joy, which is the genius again, and then Liza, just because it's Latin, can I get you to do the two sections of Latin post that?
I clap my hands for joy and seat you both next to my heart. In leaves of purest gold, this most auspicious love shall be enrolled. Be joined to us, and as to earth we bow, so to those royal feet bend your steel brow. In name of all these centers on whom virtue builds more than these of antique Rome, shouting a cheerful welcome, since no clime nor age is gone o'er the head of time, did e'er cast up such joys, nor like the sum, but here shall stand in, nor the like sum, but here shall stand in the world's years to come, dread king. Our hearts make good what words do want to bid thee boldly enter Troy novant.
Again, we're quoting Marshall, I think. Rerum certa salus terrarum gloria Caesar, sospite quo magnus credimus esse Deus. Idem, that means the same, so we're still quoting Marshall. Dilexere prius pueri juvenesque senesque. Let all the people rejoice, the young and the old. At nunc infantes te quoque Caesar amant. Even the infants love you, Caesar. This should have been the first offering of the city's love, but his majesty not making his entrance according to expectation, it was not utterly thrown from the altar, but laid by. Marshall again. Iam crescunt media pegmata Chelsavia. Am I still going on, or is someone else taking over?
Good Sir Greg, we cannot hear you.
I'm happy to do this bit because I like this bit.
Go for it. Tracey, sorry. I didn't realize one.
Right. No Latin. By this time, imagine that poets who draw speaking pictures and painters who make dumb poesy had their heads and hands full, the one for native and sweet invention, the other for lively illustration of what the former should devise. Both of them emulously contending but not striving with the properest and brightest colours of wit and art to set out the beauty of the great triumphant day. For the more exact and formal managing of which business, a select number both of aldermen and commoners, like so many Romain something or others ideals, were communi Castilio chosen forth, at whose discretion the charge, contrivings, projects, and all other dependencies, owing to so troublesome a work, was entirely and judicially committed. Many days were thriftily consumed to mould the bodies of these triumphs comely, and to the honour of the place, and at last the stuff whereof to frame them was beaten out. The soul that should give life and a tongue to this entertainment being to breathe out of writers' pens, the limbs of it to lie at the hard-handed mercy of mechanicals, I think. In a moment, therefore, of time, our carpenters, joiners, carvers, and other artificers sweating at their chisels.
I'm guessing the next quote is by Virgil, I want to say, but I do not know. It's VIR, so that's the abbreviation. Acigunt or Acigunt, depending on how you want to pronounce it, or something. Acigunt, I don't know. Omnes operi. Not a finger, but had an office. He was held unworthy ever after to suck the honeydew of peace. that against his coming, by whom our peace wears a triple wreath, would offer to play the drone. The streets are surveyed, heights, breadths, and distances taken, as it were to make fortifications for the solemnities. 7 pieces of ground, like so many fields for a battle, are plotted forth, upon which these arches of triumph must show themselves in glory. Aloft, in the end, do they advance their proud foreheads. So basically, thus far, we've had a scene of the genius of London, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, the spirit of London, welcoming the St. George and St. Andrew to the city and telling them basically, you don't have to fight, it's fine. We like each other now. And now basically this bit about not a finger but had an office was basically a description of how they went about to build these arches of triumph, which are basically set up to welcome, not to welcome, but well, to welcome the king, but also to set up the entertainments that they're going to perform. If I'm not mistaken, Tracey, please help.
Absolutely bang on. I think this is interesting passage actually because of the way that he's trying to kind of separate out the different roles, you know, the kind of the poets on one side and the artifice on the other. Johnson does this a lot, obviously, and it's just a really interesting insight into what's going on behind the scenes and how this whole thing was realized. Yeah. Obviously, he's you know, there's the usual kind of exaggeration and you know, not telling the full story. You know, the city didn't sort of spontaneously decide that it was going to spend an enormous amount of money. They were told they had to. So you know, there was a lot of resistance to it actually. But yeah, that's not going to be in this pamphlet clearly.
And also, this was at the end of a plague season, so basically, it was kind of like, we don't have any money to deal with this, but we will try because we have to. I'm guessing, I don't know. You're muted, but I think you're sort of agreeing. I can't tell. Yes, so after this there's a bit of Latin which is basically circumpueri, which has something to do with children, I think. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, I'll hand it over to Liza because I am inept.
I think this is children all around, unmarried girls sing a song.
Kind of cool,
and it's a rejoicing song.
Well, of course, I mean, you know, we're rejoicing for the king.
Yes. I actually, those 2 preceding paragraphs, I do love that because it's very much a sort of, this is Tech Week, this is how theater happens sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's quite a lovely bit of stage sort of documentation of stage practice by someone who really knows what goes on backstage.
Yeah, but also it's kind of like the bit before where he goes, this should have been the first offering. It kind of like feels a bit like, well, I wrote this but nobody appreciated it. Yeah, so I think the way we'll go is Liza, Desna, then next bit of Latin, Liza, and then Tracey maybe, or I don't know if that's like a sort of yeah. I mean, we'll work it out. It
feels like the Latin's like a little subtitle almost.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to work out. So
yeah. Okay, so if I start at even children.
Yeah. Then Liza.
Even children, might they who suffered, would gladly have spent their little strength about the engines that mounted up the frames. Such a fire of love and joy was kindled in every breast. The day for whose sake these wonders of wood climbed thus into the clouds is now come, being so early up by reason of artificial lights which wakened it, that the sun overslept himself and rose not in many hours after, yet bringing with it into the very bosom of the city a world of people. The streets seemed to be paved with men. Stalls instead of rich wares were set out with children, open casements filled up with women. All glass windows taken down, but in their places sparkled so many eyes, that had it not been the day, the light which reflected from them was sufficient to have made one. He that should have compared the empty and untrodden walks of London, which were to be seen in that late, mortally destroyed deluge, with the thronged streets now, might have believed that upon this day began a new creation, and that the city was the only workhouse wherein sundry nations were made. A goodly and civil order was observed, in marshalling all the companies according to their degrees, the first beginning at the upper end of St. Mark's Lane, and the last reaching above the conduit in Fleet Street, their seats being double-railed, upon the upper part whereon they leaned, the streamers, ensigns, and bannerets of each particular company decently fixed, and directly against them, even quite through the body of the city, so high as to Temple Bar, a single rail, in fair distance from the other, was likewise erected to put off the multitude, amongst whose tongues, which in such consorts never lie still, though there were no music, yet as the poet says,
Good poet, please help us.
I can have a go at it. Vox diosa sonat populorum est, vox tamen una.
Many voices sound, the voice of the people, however, is one.
Yay! I do like how you have the multitude and then like sort of everyone, the goodly civil order of like the companies as well. It's I'm guessing that's the point. You've got this differentiation of status as well, among other things. Any thoughts since we're here? I quite enjoyed that description. That's why I'm pausing here. Yeah.
We've got the rails again, haven't we? We've had some rails with the stuff with Visit of Christian the other week.
Yes.
Again, this is a really nice kind of vivid picture of what wouldn't normally be discussed, the sort of the more everyday, people lining up along the streets and where they were, and I mean, honestly, most livery companies had dozens and dozens of streamers and banners and so on, so it would have been incredibly kind of almost overwhelming colour, and they're usually silk. Yeah, it would have been really spectacular, actually.
Yeah, I like the implication that children are basically troublemakers. Might they have been suffered? Desna, you had a thought.
I think there's a really lovely sense of expectation here. Anticipation that this description builds. Like people gathering, and it's a little bit. Some of the description's a little bit flowery, but the idea that the light reflected from everyone's eyes kind of outshines the sun almost, or something along those lines. It's kind of you do get that sense of kind of sparkling anticipation. Everyone's quite excited, wide-eyed. Yeah, and also I think I'm guessing this mention of the late mortally destroying deluge might be a reference to the plague. So there's a sense of having come through something as well. It's just really interesting. Yeah.
Also, the empty and untrodden walks of London is very like lockdown 2020, which we're not, I don't know. Are we allowed to talk about that? Yeah. Tracey.
I'm just saying that there's some echoes there of one of my favourite of Dekker's works, which is A Wonderful Year, which came out in 1603, which was partly about the death of Elizabeth, partly about the plague, and partly about the accession of James. And he's virtually self-plagiarising in passages here. So why not? Really, it's good stuff. But he's fascinated by spectators. John Dekker, we get that in his early shows as well. Look at all these people looking. It's like he's there. Like, I think you say, Desna, it's really kind of vivid, isn't it? Look at these people looking, they're waiting, and you kind of, oh yeah.
It's kind of cool as well that you have this whole thing of, well, it feels like, I don't know, it's the sort of early modern equivalent of Prince Ali. Yes, it is he. Ali Ababa. Anyway, look at Disney. Yeah, I don't know. I like the descriptions here. Any other thoughts before we move on? Also, the streets seem to be paved with men. Then you have like stalls with children, and then women in the casements. So that's also like, I like how you have a sense of where everyone is as well. Yeah. Shall we move on then? Liza, could you please take over for nothing that they speak could be made anything. But you are muted. So passionate and yet so quiet.
Nothing that they speak could be made anything, yet all that was spoken sounded to this purpose, that still his majesty was coming. They have their longings, and behold, afar off they spy him, richly mounted on a white jennet, under a rich canopy sustained by 8 barons of the Cinque Ports. The tower serving that morning but for his withdrawing chamber, wherein he made him ready. And from thence stepped presently into his city of London, which for the time might worthily borrow the name of his court royal, his passage alongst that court offering itself for more state through 7 gates, of which the first was erected at Fenchurch.
And I feel like I need a map. Yeah.
Yes, Tracey, you
They
had a
came
map.
up from the tower and they walked up a really narrow little lane called Mark Lane onto Fenchurch Street. So we're on the kind of eastern side of the city now. And I think part of that, it's a traditional route. It was used for other royal entries. But part of it is that you get the distinction between the tiny little Mark Lane and coming out onto Fenchurch, which is a much wider street. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they kind of play with that a lot. Cheapside, Soper Lane, the same sort of deal, really. And the other thing worth commenting on, I think, is that the Tower of London is geographically within the limits of the City of London, but actually is completely separate. It's a royal property. So James, in a way, has always been in London, but he's entering London.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, it's a technicality, but it was important then.
Yeah. Well, also, I seem to remember there is a, like, in one of, I think it's the coronation of Queen Anne, like who married Henry. So, which was sort of secondary to his first wife. You've got her coming out of the tower, bringing out her own stuff, and it's like, okay, cool. Yeah. Also 7 gates. I'm intrigued by the number. Yeah. It's just poetically beautiful, I guess. And any other thoughts about this section? Okay. Thus presenting itself. Tracey, would you like to read this section, which has no Latin in it?
Architectural detail. Thus presenting itself, the Fenchurch Arch, it was an upright flat square, Fenchurch, for it contained 50 foot in the perpendicular and 50 foot in the ground line. The upper roof thereof, one distinct graces, bore up the true models of all the notable houses, turrets, and steeples within the city. The gate under which His Majesty did pass was 12 foot wide and 18 foot high. A postern likewise at one side of it being 4 foot wide and 8 foot in height. A postern likewise at the one side of it being 4 foot. Oh, sorry, I've done that bit. Oops. On the other side of the gate stood a great French term of stone advanced upon wooden pedestals. 2 half pilasters of rustic standing over their heads. I could shoot more arrows at this mark and teach you without the carpenter's rule how to measure all the proportions belonging to this fabric. But an excellent hand being at this instant curiously describing all the 7 and bestowing on them their fair prospective limbs, your eye shall hereafter rather be delighted in beholding these pictures than now be wearied in looking upon mine.
He sounds very modest, but I don't know if that's just me like having heard that, like, sort of, yeah.
It has something to do with the fact that the verses for this arch were actually written by Johnson.
Yeah.
When we come on to look at the Johnson's version, he kind of focuses on his bits, as you'd expect, and Dekker tends to focus on his own, but that's kind of, it's a composite occasion.
Yeah. But I do like the detail and sort of, I could shoot more arrows at this mark and teach you without the carpenter's rule. It's like sort of, I feel like it's an expression that nobody used, but he's made it his own. Liza, Desna, could you go through the lists and then the personages and then of which personages? Yeah.
I can do the lists.
I think it should work.
The personages, as well mutes as speakers, in this pageant were these, viz. 1. The highest person was the Briton monarchy. 2. At her feet, fate, divine wisdom. 3. Beneath her stood the genius of the city, a man. 4. At his right hand was placed a personage figuring the council of the city. 5. Under all these lay a person representing Thamesis, the river. 6 other persons, being daughters to genius, were advanced above him on a spreading ascent, of which the first was 1, gladness, 2, the second, veneration, 3, the third, promptitude, 4, the fourth, vigilance, 5, the fifth, loving affection, 6, the sixth, unanimity. Do you want me to do the next section as well? Yeah. Of which all personages, Genius and Thamesis, were the only speakers. Thamesis being presented by one of the children of Her Majesty's revels, Genius by Master Allen, servant to the young prince. His gratulatory speech, which was delivered with excellent action and a well-tuned audible voice, being to this effect: that London may be proud to hold this day, and therefore in the name of the Lord Mayor and Aldermen, the Council, Commoners and multitude, the heartiest welcome is tendered to His Majesty that ever was bestowed on any king, etc.
So basically, wait, the young prince being young Prince Henry, right? Yeah, I'm guessing. Because we haven't had, Charles is not around yet. Yeah, I was wondering also, so Desna put in the chat, though Genius was a woman, but is now a man. So I'm confused. Gender swapping, yay. What on earth is going on? Yeah, any thoughts? Also, like, this person must have had a lot of, like, sort of a lot of actors to pay, but nobody, you only get paid if you speak, maybe? I don't know. It's like, because that would be cheaper, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how you would represent these.
It might be more to do with the significance of the role. It's more important to have someone knows what they're doing, who's actually speaking the parts. And clearly, in different ways, these individuals will have been trained.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because also you've got the sort of, well, one of the children of Her Majesty's rebels being, I'm guessing Her Majesty being Queen Elizabeth, who died, and then like it is passed on, or is that someone else?
yeah, it would have been taken over by Queen Anna, and obviously Henry's men is Ali.
So that's Edward Allen, according to,
Yeah,
that's kind of cool. It's just
it's
like,
very cool.
yeah, it's like name drop, yay, we know this person.
Very cool.
Yeah. With excellent action, yes. And yeah, we should probably move on and get more data. I'm just wondering who will be next. Tracey, please. Oh wait, no, there's, yeah, okay. There's very little Latin in this section.
Which banquet, yeah?
Yes.
Which banquet being taken away with the sound of music, the waits and hautboys of London. There, ready for the purpose, His Majesty made his entrance into this his court royal. Under this first gate, upon the battlements of the work, in great capitals was inscribed thus, Londinium. And under that, in a smaller but not different character, was written Camera Regia, the King's Chamber. Carry on. Okay, I'll go down to where it goes to verse again. Too short a time in their opinions that were glued there together so many hours to behold him, did His Majesty dwell in this first place. Yet too long it seemed to other happy spirits that higher up in his Elysian fields awaited for his presence. He sets on therefore like the sun in his zodiac, bountifully dispersing his beams amongst particular nations, the brightness and warmth of which was now spent first upon the Italians and next upon the Belgians. The space of ground on which their magnificent arches were builded, being not unworthy to bear the name of the great hall to this our court royal, wherein was to be heard and seen the sundry languages and habits of strangers, under which princes' roofs render excellent harmony. In a pair of scales do I weigh these two nations, and find them neither in hearty love to His Majesty, in advancement of the city's honour, nor in forwardness to glorify these triumphs, to differ one grain. To dispute which had done best were to doubt that one had done well. Call their inventions therefore twins, or if they themselves do not like that name, for happily they are emulous of one glory, yet thus may we speak of them.
Liza, please take it away. Till the before him, maybe. Yeah. from Facies?
Facies non omnibus una. That's Ovid, apparently. Yeah. Nec diversa tamen, qualem decet or decet esse sororum. They're, what is it? They're not everywhere united, but they're also not too different. We can call them sisters. Because whosoever fixis oculis, with a fixed gaze, beholds their proportions, explerimentem nequit, ardescitque tuendo, Virgil. I have no idea, but I think his mind, I think the person's mind is not sufficient to behold their. Oh, I have no idea.
Sorry, I'm enjoying
Gracious
this.
street.
Yeah.
The street upon whose breast this Italian jewel was born was never worthy of that name which it carries till this hour. For here did the king's eye meet a second object that enticed him by tarrying to give honor to the place, and thus did the quaintness of the engine seem to discover itself before him.
I like the sense of suspense here. It's like, oh my God, we have something happening.
There's a second object.
Yeah, I know.
And it's Italian.
Yeah. Well, also the Italians and the Belgians, I'm guessing, were the people who paid for this. Because yes. Tracey, please help explain.
Well, nodding vigorously, yes, indeed, absolutely. As they did for previous royal entries, actually, there was a Florentine arch when Mary Tudor became queen. So yeah, there's lots of kind of political reasons for that. You know, there is these immigrant communities that want to carry on in the king's favour. You know, they want to be able to carry on living and working in the city as they have done for generations. So yeah. And they've been through the mill a bit, because when they were brought in under Edward, and then when Mary came in, there was threats to basically get rid of all the Protestant strangers, and then they were kind of safe again under Elizabeth, and you know they're kind of a bit anxious here really at this point. When he says Belgians, obviously he means the Low Countries generally, but that's explained a bit more further on. The other thing is Gracious Street it's Grace Church Street, but in this period it's always called Gracious Street.
Mm-hmm. I do like how there's that moment of sort of, well, I guess also because it's a transition of power, so they basically have to please the king, or else they're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the Italian arch was actually located near Leadenhall.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So that's sort of 2/3 of the way up Gracious Street, near the junction with Cornhill.
Which is not too far from like where, like the map that the sort of pub crawl map that we've got, like the Lord Mayor shows the circular tube.
Yeah, we could do with Rob's little tube map, couldn't we, right now?
But I'm guessing it's not too far from there, because like they kind of it would have been easier to clear the streets there as well.
Yeah, it's a relatively wide street, Gracious Street. So yeah.
And well, the bit I was curious about was too short a time in their opinions that were glued there, so many hours to behold him. So basically, he's saying that there was so many people that came to see him, as in came to see James.
He's very tactfully trying to say that the king didn't stick around very long, but elsewhere when they get to poultry later on, basically king sort of whizzed off by the time they finished all the speeches. He's long gone. He was right down on Cheapside by then. You get the distinct impression that Dekker's trying to make the best of it, that James wasn't that bothered about this kind of stuff. You know, he just wanted to get it over and done with. Yeah,
interesting, because usually they do stick around, and kind of, Anyway, we should proceed with the Italians pageant. Desna, would you like to grace us with the Italians pageant in Gracious Street as well, or on Gracious Street?
Indeed, just to the end of that first paragraph, well, up to between two of the columns.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. The Italians' pageant. The building took up the whole breadth of the street, of which the lower part was a square garnished with 4 great columns, in the midst of which square was cut out a fair and spacious high gate, arched, being 27 foot in the perpendicular line and 18 at the ground line. Over the gate, in golden characters, these verses, in a long square, were inscribed. With apologies to old Latin speakers everywhere, Tu rugere imperio populus Jacobi memento, Pi tibi erant artes, pacique imponere morum, Parceri subjectis et debellari superbos. And directly above this was advanced the arms of the kingdom, the supporters fairly cut out to the life. Over the lion, some pretty distance from it, was written Jacobo Regi Magnum, and above the head of the unicorn at the like distance this, Henrici 7 Abnep. In a large square erected above all these, King Henry VII was royally seated in his imperial robes, to whom King James, mounted on horseback, approaches and receives a sceptre, over both their heads these words being written, Hic vir, hic est.
So I have no idea what the last means. I didn't know that vir is the word for man. So yeah, so this is a man. Okay, he's here, I'm guessing, or something like that.
I think hic means here, so it's like,
Yeah.
here's the man.
Here's the guy.
Ecce homo, indeed.
Yeah, pun intended. I mean,
Jacobus is Jacobus, so
James, yes.
Yeah.
and I think Henry VII, I think James claims his basically his descent from Henry VII, the first
Yeah.
Tudor, which would make him legitimate king. Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of an issue, that one.
Yeah, just a little bit. And so it's like, for 45 years they didn't have a king, had a queen. So that wouldn't be awkward at all.
And the lion and the unicorn, is this one of the first times that the lion and the unicorn appear together in heraldry? Because does the unicorn represent Scotland, or am I completely and utterly wrong about that?
It's meant to be the national animal, even though it technically doesn't exist. Details.
No, they exist.
No, they totally exist.
My Little Pony wouldn't lie to me.
I mean, I've not watched it, so I wouldn't know. But I think you're right about the sort of, because technically they haven't had the unicorn before, but they've had the lion, definitely.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Lion is England and the unicorn is Scotland. Although, of course, there was no such thing as Britain formally for another 100 years. So even though James wanted there to be very badly, it didn't actually happen. It was just a kind of, it was a consequence of him being king of both England and Scotland, but it was no formal union for some considerable time after that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yep.
Scottish unicorn.
Yes. I suppose. Wait. Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where we were, and then yes. Okay, we're here. More architecture. Between two of the columns on the right hand was fixed up a square table, wherein in lively and excellent colors was limned a woman, figuring peace, her head securely leaning on her left hand, her body modestly bestowed to the length upon the earth. Okay. In her other hand was held an olive branch, the ensign of peace. Her word was out of Virgil, being thus: Deus nobis haec otia fecit, or fecit, depending on how you pronounce it. Beneath that piece was another square table reaching almost to the bases of the two columns, in which two seeming sea personages were drawn to the life, both of them lying, or rather leaning on the bosom of the earth, naked. The one a woman, her back only seen, the other a man, his hand stretching and fastening itself upon her shoulder. The word that this dead body spake was this: I decus I nostrum. Upon the left-hand side of the gate, between the other two columns, were also two square tables. There's a lot of square tables. In the one of which were two persons portrayed to the life, naked and wild in looks, the word expectate solo trinobanti. Liza, please.
Well, the trinobanti were the they were one of the Celtic tribes that were pre-Roman, right? And I forget, they're not Boadicea's lot. Boadicea's lot are Iceni, but they might have allied with her.
I'm not sure. But I'm intrigued by this whole. There's so much nudity in this, and I'm like, what?
Well,
I'm
it's
not against
Italian.
it. Yeah.
They're a little spicy then as now. But we have a wild savage Briton here, a wild savage Celt.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
But these are square tables. They're pictures, right? Are they pictures or are they tableaux vivants? What do we think?
I think it's probably drawings rather than. I don't know. I'm not sure. I want to ask Tracey, but I feel like the history part will actually spoil the surprise.
It does say that the person carved out to the life a woman suggests that they are reliefs.
So their reliefs may be done in plaster or in wood, maybe.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. It's I mean the bulk of the arches were wood, but like wood painted to look like stone.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Very cool. Busy chisels, yeah.
Well, also it's just interesting because it's kind of like if you try to replicate that today, it would take a lot of money and a lot of time. And the craftsmanship is probably not around anymore. I guess. I don't know, maybe
Yes, I wonder if this was a specific thing that they had to engage Italian artisans for.
It may possibly. I mean, probably the Italian arch. They probably had their own stranger artisans, and certainly some of the best known artisans in London were of stranger extraction. The Christmas family almost definitely were Dutch originally, but yeah, it's Painter Stainless Company are kind of alive and well by then, and these craftsmen tended to have to be able to do more than one thing. So they would be doing funeral monuments, or they'd be doing this kind of stuff, and painting banners, or they were incredibly versatile.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting though, because like for example, if Rob was around, he would be talking about how we replicate this. And there's a part of me going, yeah, I think this is out of our budget at the moment. But hey, if you want to donate,
find originals and do big projections.
Yeah, that could work. Actually, it might work better. Desna, would you like to take over and over that in another square till well, keep reading and I'll stop.
Sorry, remind me where we are going from now, because
and over that in another square. It's after the
got it, after Trinabanti, yes. Yeah. And over that in another square, carrying the same proportion, stood a woman upright, holding in her hand a shield, beneath whom was inscribed in golden characters, Spes Fidissima Rerum. And this was the shape and front of the first great square, whose top being flat was garnished with pilasters, and upon the root was directed a great pedestal, on which stood a person carved out to the life, a woman, her left hand leaning on a sword with the point downward, and her right hand reaching forth a diadem, which she seemed by bowing of her knee and head to bestow upon his majesty. On the four corners of this upper part stood 4 naked portraitures ingrate with artificial trumpets in their hands. In the arch of the gate was drawn at one side a company of palm trees, young and as it were but newly springing, over whose branches 2 naked winged angels flying held forth a scroll which seemed to speak thus, Spes Altera. On the contrary side was a vine, spreading itself into many branches and winding about olive and palm trees, 2 naked winged angels hanging likewise in the air over them, and holding a scroll between them, filed with this inscription, Uxor sicut vitis abundance, et fili tui sicut palmites oliverum.
Yeah, that looks about right.
May your wife be as a fruitful vine, and your children like the branches of the olive tree.
Yeah, actually that makes sense. Yeah, especially for a king. Yeah, they did not want to have a spare Or well, they would want to have spare in the case of anyway. Yes, let's not.
Well, the spare ended up being necessary, which, you know, part of what got us into this mess.
Yeah, true. What was
But I think the olive and the vine metaphor for fertility are very much from the Bible. I think I forget where in the Bible, but definitely somewhere. Old Testament, somewhere.
I don't know. There's a part of me going, the vine is definitely from Greek mythology, but like, you know, just because.
Oh, possibly.
I don't know. I do not know. Well, the olive is for peace, though, as well. So.
Yes.
And the palm trees are definitely, I'm guessing.
They are there for victory. Victorious people get a palm. You also get a palm if you die a martyr, but the victory thing is older. It's Roman, I think. Although it might be Greek. Who knows?
I was thinking more of the palm trees they use for like Palm Sunday. But maybe
yes.
that's just me.
That is also, well, it was also a symbol of triumph. That was the day Jesus entered Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, true that.
On the back of a donkey. But
Yes.
they you know, strewed the streets with palm fronds and made a jubilee of it.
I'm intrigued by I am intrigued by the imagery here, where you have a woman, her left hand leaning on a sword with the point downward, and her right hand reaching forth a diadem, which she seems to be bestowing upon His Majesty, which is kind of like, you know, before that we had a man handing power to, well, handing the scepter. So basically King Henry VII handing power, scepter, to King James. But now we have someone else handing the diadem to King James, which is interesting sort of shift. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, a woman upright holding in her hands a shield, that's very like the figure of Britannia that we get these days. Although I don't know if it's explicitly that at the time. It could be Pallas, Pallas Athena, Minerva. She's often depicted holding a shield with the Gorgon's face on it.
Yeah,
but the shield is protection.
Yeah, and
sword
yeah,
and a different she's holding a shield, and beneath her is inscribed in golden characters, "Hope is the most faithful of things," I think.
One second, I need to actually find the relevant section. Oh yeah. Hope, or
possibly. I mean, that's mine. And then so we have one woman figure with a shield, and then we have another with a sword with the point down, signifying peace, I think.
Yep.
And the right hand holding out a crown. So it's interesting that these figures are not named. Perhaps the Italians had an intended symbolism for them, but perhaps they personify the land of Britain, or
could be. Let's read on. I personally, I'm enjoying this because you can actually, even without actually seeing an image of the arches of triumph or whatever, you can actually picture this.
And I love the naked people with trumpets. Like,
yes,
vital ingredient for any party.
I mean, yes. I mean, not like I've been to those. Anyway, yeah. Moving on. Nightlife aside. Liza, please take us away to if your imaginations, sorry.
If your imaginations after the beholding of these objects will suppose that this majesty is now gone to the other side of this Italian trophy, do but cast your eyes back, and there you shall find just the same proportions which the forepart or breast of our arch carrieth, with equal number of columns, pedestals, pilaster, limbed pieces, and carved statues. Over the gate, this distich presents itself. Nonne tuo imperio satis est Jacobe potiri, imperio mi musas, emule queris habes. Yes. Good stuff about James. Under which verses a wreath of laurels. No, wait, this is someone else, isn't it? Someone else.
I was going to say, please read on.
Okay.
After et quis signum, and then we can move on to
right.
Tracey.
under which verses a wreath of laurel seemed to be ready to be let fall on his majesty's head as he went under it, being held beneath two naked antique women, perhaps antic women, their bodies stretching at the full length to compass over the arch of the gate. And above those verses, in a fair azure table, this inscription was advanced in golden capitals: Expectatione orbis terrarum, Regi genitor numerosis, regum genitore felicis, Regi martigenarum Augustissimus. That's right. It's all short for issimus. So it's numerosissimus felicissimus, and then Regi martigenarum Augustissimus, Regi musarum gloriosissimus. Itali statuerunt laetitiae et quis signum. So there were, yes.
It was Latin.
The Italians, yes, something about Italians and rejoicing. So the whole world awaits. Let's see, I'm guessing here, but the king's most numerous posterity,
and happy,
the royal parent,
children.
the royal parents most happy.
Oh yeah, genitor.
Martigenarum, perhaps Marti is Mars. So a realm most strong in arms, and Augustissimus is same title as Augustus, the emperor. Mighty, August, I don't know. And Regi Musarum, the kingdom of the Muses, most glorious. That's my guess.
Yeah, I don't know enough Latin for this. I mean, I know Italian.
The Italians bid us rejoice with this sign, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think that's basically what they would write. Tracey, any info on this before we move on?
I think it's a kind of general sense of, somebody commented there's lots of naked creatures, I see women, which I think shows that they would be depictions rather than people, which is kind of okay because it's kind of classical and stuff, doesn't really count. But I don't get the sense that Dekker's description really fully understands who a lot of these characters are supposed to be. I think that's kind of interesting in itself. Some of them he clearly does, this is Apollo, this is but some of it's just like, it's a woman carrying this thing. So, this, which is kind of interesting. So it's almost like that's the Italians thing, they've done their own thing and it kind of looked a bit like that, but I don't fully understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Would you like to read the next part on the right hand of this back part?
Me? Yeah. Okay. On the right hand of this back part, between two of the columns was a square table on which was drawn a woman crowned with beautiful and fresh flowers, a caduceus in her hand. All the notes of a plenteous and lively spring being carried about her. The soul that gave life to this speaking picture was omnis seret omnia tellus. Above this piece, in another square, was portrayed a Triton, his trumpet at his mouth, seeming to utter this much: Dum caelum stellas. Upon the left hand of this back part, in most excellent colours, antically attired, stood the four kingdoms, England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, holding hands together, this being the language of them all: concordes stabile fatorum numine. Do I go down to the end of this bit? Yeah. This middle great square that was advanced over the frieze of the gate held Apollo, with all his ensigns and properties belonging unto him, as a sphere, books, a caduceus, an octahedron, with other geometrical bodies, and a harp in his left hand. His right hand with a golden wand in it, pointing to the battle of Lepanto fought by the Turks, of which his majesty hath written a poem, and to do him honour, Apollo himself does seem here to take upon him to describe his word, fortunate viewer. These were the mutes and properties that helped furnish out this great Italian theatre, upon whose stage the sound of no voice was appointed to be heard, but of one, and that in the presence of the Italians themselves, who in two little opposite galleries under and within the arch of the gate, very richly and neatly hung, delivered thus much Latin to His Majesty.
Yeah, I don't know if we should read the Latin because there's a
Shall
lot
I
of
have a
it.
go?
Yeah, I was
Eh.
just gonna make a note that it's interesting how he goes on about like what all the the signs of Apollo. But yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yes. I mean, I could try and translate this by the seat of my pants and just give a gist, maybe.
But a lot of it is like Salve Rex Magna Salve.
Yes. Hail, great king! Hail, your Italians salute your Majesty. We rejoice at your happy arrival. We predict a happy future under you. Something about your kingdom being full of great souls who do you homage. Neither Atlas, who held up the heavens, nor the convex, the bowl of heaven itself, can attain the height of the merit of a good king. Hoc est eius quem de tape. So, something about his learned expressions and admirable writing. Blessed be the fortunate people where a philosopher
Reigns.
where philosophy reigns and a philosopher king. Hail, noble king! Hail, long may you live, king! We congratulate the king, the most powerful king, the wisest king. We congratulate. We Italians cry as one. All of us.
Yeah.
Mamma mia, Liza, go for a pizza.
Yeah, totally. And thank you for that, Liza. Actually, that's as someone who doesn't know Latin but knows Italian, I think that's pretty close. I'm not sure. I'm just intrigued by all this sucking up. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
Well, presumably they're Catholics and they really, really don't want to be kicked out.
Yeah, this is true. I did have a point to make, but then I forgot. I got sidetracked by the Latin and the sort of the fact that he wrote a poem. Yeah, and it gets mentioned, which I don't know. Do we? Obviously, we don't have the poem here, but do we know of the poem? Is that a thing?
I'm not aware of it, but James did consider himself to be a bit of a creative, philosophical genius. So it's a good note to strike, if you like, if you want to endear yourself with him. I think it's quite a strong contrast to the next one, which is much more materialistic and kind of tangible, really, what the people from other countries are doing.
Yeah, it's interesting how they're like, yes, you are so wise, you are a philosopher king. Nothing can possibly go wrong. I'm there's a point going, how does he remember all this? I mean, they probably had it in writing so he could copy it down. I'm guessing. Yeah, I know. That's just a technicality. I suppose. Desna, would you like to read the final paragraph of this of the section of the Italian pageant?
Having hoisted up our sails and taken leave of this Italian shore, let our next place of casting anchor be upon the land of the 17 provinces, where the Belgians, tired in the costly habits of their own native country, without the fantastic mixtures of other nations, but more richly furnished with love, stand ready to receive His Majesty, who, according to their expectation, does most graciously make himself and his royal train their princely guests. The house which these strangers have builded to entertain him in is thus contrived.
And basically that's the transition from Gracious Street to, I'm guessing somewhere else.
Yeah, they've come down. They've basically sort of hung a left at Leadenhall, and they've come down Cornhill.
Mhm.
So this arch is set up adjacent to the Royal Exchange.
Okay. Hence we have the Dutch pageant, the pageant of the Dutchman by the Royal Exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then Dekker has nothing to do with this. He's actually, I mean, he did the writing for the part that was omitted.
They did all that themselves. So no, he may have been given access to some text or something. Sounds like he probably did, because there's some Latin, but again, it's a bit more impressionistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just intrigued because it's a lot of obviously how this works, I'm guessing he wrote something and then some of it was used, and then the pageant, the 7 arches were designed separately by the companies. So yeah,
there's no speeches in this one. It's nearly all sort of dumb show. So I think that's interesting in its own right, really. They didn't necessarily have the requisite skills to write speeches and verses, but they constructed the kind of imagery and stuff.
I'm just intrigued by how it works and sort of who's in charge of what. I mean, not on a technical level, but sort of who's handling all this stuff. But I mean,
they definitely commissioned a Dutch architect to construct the arch, and he complained virulently about not having enough space, because the road narrows. The bottom Cornhill, it still does actually. You go down Cornhill towards the Royal Exchange, it narrows quite radically towards the end. Mm-hmm. And he was saying basically, you've given us a space that's not big enough to do something decent in. If you want to know more about this, is a fantastic book by Marjorie Rubright, which talks you through the contribution of the Dutch to the culture of London in the period. It's really, really interesting.
That's kind of cool. And it's I'm guessing this is also why we get the dimensions in each section. We have it was 27 feet, however, and then by 18 feet, whereas this is 18 feet by 12 foot wide, which is different sort of to the previous sections that we saw, if you've been paying attention.
This is my favorite one. This is really interesting, actually, because it really engages with the location. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a sense of what the Dutch are claiming they contribute to the country and to the city. That they are hardworking, diligent, loyal, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, they are.
It's a bit more sort of remote, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Well, then, without any further ado, please lead us into this pageant from the foundation. The foundation of this. Yeah.
Do you want me to do it? Okay. I'll try that.
Section.
The foundation.
Not all the Latin. We can worry about that in a minute.
Pageant of the Dutchman by the Royal Exchange. The foundation of this was, as it were by fate, laid near unto a royal place, for it was a royal and magnificent labour. It was bounded in with the houses on both sides of the street, so proudly, as all the rest also did this extend her body in breadth. The passage of state was a gate, large, ascending 18 foot high, aptly proportioned to the other limbs, and 12 foot wide, arched. 2 lesser posterns were for common on feet, cut out and opened on the sides of the other. Within a small frieze, and kissing the very forehead of the gate, the edifice spake thus: Unicis a fato surgo non digena hoeres. Whilst lifting your eye to an upper, larger frieze, you may there be enriched with these golden capitals: Jacobo, Anglo-Scot, Frank, Hibernian, Regi, Opt, Prince, Max, Belgae, dead. I get that bit. That's all the nations of which he claims sovereignty. But bestowing your sight upon a large azure table lined quite through with the characters of gold, likewise you may for your pains receive this inscription: Orbis, Restivitor, Passis, Fiend, Relig, Propov, T-check.
I'm guessing it's religioso.
All abbreviations. So
all the sort of.
Liza, help me out here.
Help us, please. Yeah.
are we talking about the bit about where are we? Orbis res
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Restorer of the globe, founder of peace,
Propagator of religion?
propagator or proponent of religion. James, oh God, I don't know. Regi means king, and I'm guessing the P and F, felicissimus et
Prosperity.
yeah, probably, or peace packs something to do with that.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about
In the year of
Anna, the queen.
Oh yeah, the wife.
The Anne of Denmark, the queen, conjugue, married.
Sister? Sort of.
Yeah.
It's basically from the family tree of the king in this case.
Yes, Henry the First.
Son.
The Prince Henry.
Yes.
In the city. Let's see, in the city and the world, in publius urbis et orbis laetitia, in the city and the world and the globe, the globe, let there be joy. Seculique felicitat.
Or joy.
So, in this happy 17th century, Dutch merchants have thus welcomed their benevolent king into the city, and a word about how nice Elizabeth was as well, that they were probably her loyal subjects as well. Fausta omnia, joy, let all rejoice. Et felicia, let's see.
And reign
everywhere joy and happiness to the rulers, the imperial. Yes, we for eternity we predict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For those watching this,
I'm really spitballing here, you guys.
You're doing all right. You're doing great.
And I sing in churches a lot. I've never studied Latin.
Me neither. And I was just going to explain for like people watching this video, the reason we're stopping so much is that the Latin is basically abbreviated, so it's not like properly written out. So even if we had not to say that if we had the full word, we would understand everything, but it would be easier to read it. And yes, Liza, please continue with above which being in the heart of the trophy.
Above which being the heart of the trophy. Trophy, by the way, is from Latin tropheum. Usually a tropheum is your enemy's armor that you're displaying, but this is obviously something different. This is a pageant. Anyway, above which being the heart of the trophy was a spacious square room left open, silk curtains drawn before it, which upon the approach of his majesty being put by, 17 young damsels, all of them sumptuously adorned after their country's fashion, sat as it were in so many chairs of state, and figuring in their persons the 17 provinces of Belgia, of which everyone carried in a scutcheon excellently penciled the arms and coat of one.
Before we continue, it's like, have you noticed how many young women are in this, even if they're like not like properly alive? Anyway, yeah, I don't know how his wife felt about this.
We've got some singing girls earlier as well.
Yeah, I don't know how his wife felt about this, but I mean, yeah. Moving on above the upper edge.
They were young damsels. They're not put there for temptation. They're just, they're put there for aesthetics and symbolism.
I mean,
I'm sure they'll all be given a bag of Cheetos and a thing of Sprite and
That's exactly how they were, financed and funded in the early modern times.
yes.
Yeah. Desna, please save us. Above the upper edge, please.
Up to where?
The end of the paragraph. I don't know why I'm taking this out. Above the end of the paragraph, and then suffer your eyes is going to be Tracey, and so on and so forth.
Above the upper edge of this large square room and over the first battlement in another front advanced for the purpose, a square table was fastened upright, in which was drawn the lively picture of the king in his imperial robes, a crown on his head, the sword and sceptre in his hands. Upon his left side stood a woman, her face fixed upon his, a burning heart in her right hand, her left hanging by, a heron standing close unto her. Upon his other side stood upright, with her countenance directed likewise upon him, another woman, winged, and in a frieze beneath them which took up the full length of this square, this inscription set out itself in golden words: Viroquae satellite tutus.
Yes. Tracey, please.
Sorry, I can't type and read at the same time.
It's okay.
Suffer your eyes to be wearied no longer with gazing up so high at those sunbeams, but turn them aside to look below through the little posterns, whose state swelled quickly up to a greatness by reason of two columns that supported them on either side. In a table over the right-hand portal was in perfect colours drawn a serpent pursued by a lion. Between them, adders and snakes chasing one another, the lion scornfully casting his head back to behold the violence of a black storm that heaven powered down to overtake them. The sound that came from all this was thus: sequitur gravis ira ferocis. The opposite body to this, on the other side and directly over the other portal, whose pomp did in like manner lean upon and uphold itself by two main columns, was a square piece in which were to be seen sheep browsing, lambs nibbling, birds flying in the air, with all other arguments of a serene and untroubled season, whose happiness was proclaimed in this manner: Venit alma quiribus ora.
Directly above this, in a square table, were portrayed two kings, reverently and antiquely attired, who seemed to walk upon these golden lines. Nash. Okay. Ancitur in nostro regnum par nobile rege alter Lesiades, alter Ammonides? I'm not sure how that would be pronounced or what that means. From whom lead but your eye in a straight line to the other side over the contrary postern, and there in a second upper picture you may meet with the two other kings, not fully so antique, but as rich in their ornaments, both of them out of golden letters composing these words: Lucius Antialios Edwardus et Inde Jacobus Sextus et hic cannot speak. Hic sanxit sextus et ille fidem. Desna, would you like to take over? Sorry, Liza, would you like to take over?
And these were the nerves by which this great triumphal body was knit together, in the inferior parts of it, upon the shoulders whereof which were garnished with rows of pilasters that supported lions rampant, bearing up banners, there stood another lesser square, the head of which wore a coronet of pilasters also, and above them, upon a pedestal, curiously closed in between the tails of two dolphins, was advanced a woman, holding in one hand a golden warder, and pointing with the forefinger of the other hand up to heaven. She figured divine providence, for so at her feet was written, Provida mens celi, somewhat beneath which was to be seen an imperial crown, two scepters being fastened crosswise unto it, and delivering this speech: Sceptra haec concredidit uni.
So what is
he has glued the scepters together in one.
Yeah, that would make sense. Scotland and I was going to say Ireland, Scotland and England,
and England.
Yes. Please don't kill me. I didn't mean to say Ireland. Yeah. There are so many animals in this: the lambs, the sheep, the birds, the adders and snakes, and the lion drawn by it. And yeah, I'm mildly confused, but I'm enjoying the imagery, as per usual. Any thoughts before we move on to do a bit chunkier bits? Aside from everyone is so confused, we have no. I mean, it's a description of what we're looking at basically, so it's easy. Yeah, a picture is 1,000 words. We know. Okay, so Desna, could you read at the elbows of this upper square?
At the elbows of this upper square stood upon the four corners of a great pedestal 4 pyramids, hollow and so neatly contrived that in the night time, for anger that the sun would no longer look upon these earthly beauties, they gave light to themselves and the whole place about them. The windows from whence these artificial beams were thrown being cut out in such a fashion that, as Ovid, describing the palace of the sun, says, Clara micanti auro flamasque imitante pyropo. So did they shine afar off like chrysolites and sparkled like carbuncles. Between those 2 pyramids that were lifted up on the right hand stood Fortitude, her pillar resting itself upon this golden line. Profero quarum pondus, discrimina temno. Between the 2 pyramids on the other side, Justice challenged her place, being known both by her habit and by her voice, that spake thus: Auspicme dextra solium regale perennat.
Tracey, please take over.
We've held His Majesty.
Wait, hang on. Eric,
Wait.
it's nearly 9, and this would be a really good place to break off and start again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, very good point, Liza. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tracey. I didn't
No,
mean
no,
to
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, otherwise we're stopping in the middle of the passage, aren't we? Yeah, that's cool. I love this next bit. So,
Well, if you want to read it, we
no,
can
no,
read
no,
it,
you have
and we
fun.
can
You
read
have-
it
I've
again
written-
next time. It'll be
Because I've
good.
written about it, but you have fun with it.
No, well, will you? No, wait, you're going to be out of the country. Okay,
No,
I'm
let's.
going to be in Belgium.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
Well, in that case, maybe we should read this bit. I'm sure we can get it in before 9. Have you written about it?
Yeah.
Go for it. Sorry.
Okay, just that one bit. Then we'll stop before the Latin bit. Okay. We've held His Majesty too long from entering this 3rd gate of his court royal. It is now high time that those eyes, which on the other side are with rolling up and down for his gladsome ache with rolling up and down for his gladsome presence, should enjoy that happiness. Behold, he is in an instant passed through, the objects that there offer themselves before him being these. Our Belgic statue of triumph wears on her back as much riches as she carried upon her breast, being altogether as glorious in columns, standing on tiptoe, on as lofty and as proud pyramids. Her walked encompassed with as strong and as neat pilasters. The colours of her garments are as bright, her adornments as many. For in the next square field, next and lower, over one of the portals, were the Dutch country people toiling at their husbandry. Women carding of their hemp, the men beating it, such excellent art being expressed in their faces, their stoopings, bendings, sweatings, etc. For nothing is wanting in them but life, which no colours can give, to make them be thought more than the work of painters. Lift your eyes up a little above them and behold their exchange, the countenances of the merchants there being so lively that bargains seem to come from their lips.
That's actually kind of a cool description and a cool point to stop.
Yes, although we get more textile workers in the next paragraph also.
Yeah, true.
But what a nice, what a wonderful tableau. Tracey, you've written about this bit.
Yes, please tell us.
Yeah,
more.
it's basically the Dutch sort of saying, that we may be producing cloth back home, but we're not in any way interfering with the English cloth trade. Oh no, siree. It's all fine, and we just harmoniously work alongside you, and look how hard we work. Yeah, there's a whole load of stuff going on behind there, and sort of only about 12 years later, less than that actually, there's some big sort of political sort of scandal about an attempt to basically cut off the Dutch cloth trade, the cocaine project. So yeah, this is this is positioning on the part of the Dutch, perfectly understandably, really. But what I think what's also noticeable about this is how much more attention Dekker gives it than he did the Italian arch. And he's really getting into it. You know, there's something about it, possibly because he's got Dutch ancestry himself, that he's really engages him. You know, he says elsewhere that they were not dressed as finely, but they had more love towards the king than the Italians did. So you can tell who he favours, even though he says at the beginning of the text he doesn't favour really often. You know, he clearly does favour the Dutch.
Yeah.
And you think about some of the Dutch characters in his plays, you know, and it kind of starts to make sense, actually.
Yeah. I do like the.
I love that the Italians put on all this sumptuous spectacle with lots of, you know, abstract, you know, anthropomorphic figures being naked. And the Dutch are portraying artisanship, and they're giving us farm animals. It's nice.
Yeah. None of this fancy fripperies. You know, this is good, honest labour. Definitely. Yeah, and on the other side of the arch is about fishing as well. So it's very heavily about economic activity. You know, the way that the Dutch contribute financially to the city, to the kingdom. Mm-hmm. You know, you think about the Italians just saying, "Oh, you know, you wrote a poem," and he's like quite clever. Is that the best you've got?
And they're talking about the exchange, aren't they? They're a little above them, and behold their exchange. So they've made a figure of the exchange, and London's exchange is a replica of one in the Netherlands, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, England's Bourse. So yeah, absolutely. The Dutch, the kind of in the Low Countries, the whole concept of an exchange was basically invented there. And actually, again, behind the scenes, there was a lot of controversy about the building of the Royal Exchange in the 1570s, 60s and 70s, because a lot of Dutch craftsmen worked on it, and this was not very popular. So, you know, there's all that as well. There's lots of stuff just below the surface. Really interesting. Yeah, I mean, the Dutch became increasingly kind of important, but they weren't always welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm just intrigued by the line at the beginning of that paragraph. "We have held His Majesty too long from entering this third gate," which kind of implies that, like,
it's up down the street.
Yeah. In an instance, he's passed through. Like, where did he go? We didn't. Yeah, he sounds like he's in a hurry, but I don't know. I mean, usually kings wait for things to be, you know, they kind of enjoy the procession.
He was famously, you know, uninterested in this kind of thing. I mean, you know, we saw with the material around Visit of Christian, you know, what he was interested in, and that was sort of feasting and hunting and, you know, falling over drunk and stuff. But this kind of stuff, not so much.
Yeah.
If we do Dovetails, the Time Triumphant, there's a really fantastic passage where James visits the Royal Exchange actually before the royal entry. Mm-hmm. And the way that Dugdale describes it, I won't spoil it for you, but it's really funny and really kind of, it tells you a lot about how James came across to his new subjects, actually.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. Well, that's fabulous stuff.
Yeah, I think we were meant to be like a few pages further, but I mean, we had an interesting discussion. So
we did it justice. It's the most important thing that we did.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes, I'm sorry if I delayed us by being late.
It's okay.
Yeah. So it was great.
So thank you to the wonderful readers for their wonderful reading, unless they have anything else to say, because yes, there is nothing else.
You to wonderful Eric for the wonderful hosting.
Well, thank you. I didn't do anything. I was just here going, you read that bit because it has Latin.
Yeah,
next time maybe
thank you, Liza, for all the wonderful Latin stuff. That was
invaluable. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure people who actually know Latin would be horrified by both my pronunciation and my translation, but I do my best.
Yes.
You did us a big favor there.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. It's like, give Liza all the Latin. It's fine. She can handle it mostly.
Or if I can't, at least it's funny.
Yeah.
I totally believed every single translation you're giving us, so there you go.
Oh great. I just have to do it with more confidence. It's like, this references the game of ping pong.
Maybe not
Yeah,
that.
on that note, I
Hence
should probably
Karoulla.
stop recording, and then so thank you to the wonderful readers and for their wonderful reading and translation. Stay tuned and lift your eyes a little above them and behold their exchange.